Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Crush Fan Podcast. I am your host, Ken Therion, aka Chris Crush Jacob, because Chris Crush will make the ball jump, jump. I'm joined by my fellow Crush brother, Chris Brick Squared, aka Chris Jimenez. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing perfectly fine today, fresh off the same, pretty good one, not bad one, but looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, I think anytime we have a winning sim, things are going fine. Things are technically to expectations, and if we get a couple more of those in a row, then probably we made the playoffs, right? So it's okay. It's just fine.
Yeah, any of those is better than that '07
Oh my
loss same that
goodness.
we had.
Yeah, forget it. That's no more of those. I'm putting my foot down. I'm not allowing any more of those. That's my ruling.
Yeah, that's the spirit.
As fake commissioner, I have decided. So I want to start with so this is your third time on the podcast. So we've got the background. We know that you have some pretty good out of the park knowledge. I want to talk a little bit about some cool baseball stuff that's happening. A lot of stuff has happened in the off season. Most recently, they announced that players will be able to get to do the video in the dugout again, which is really exciting.
hmm
What's a big, anything that's happened this off season that you're excited about?
I mean, the greatest signing just happened today. The Mets just signed Jonathan Villar. How is that? It can get any better than that.
I mean that, yeah. As a Mets
No, but
fan, sure, that
yeah,
must be
as a
exciting.
Mets fan, that's honestly the main team I follow. But obviously, as a Mets fan, I love that Lindor trade that we just got a couple of weeks ago. That just made my day. Like Lindor is probably one of my, if not, it's actually my favorite player since he started, and now he's actually my favorite team. So I said that was pretty huge for the whole offseason. And not only that, to get Carlos Carrasco with him, that was amazing.
Yeah, it's that weird. Again, I know a lot of owners and GMs have talked about how rough the 2020 season was for them financially and how so many of them are going to be sellers. And then you've got a couple of teams that are just like, well, yeah, we made less money, but we still made money, so why would we stop spending money?
Yeah.
Yeah, your bottom line gets hurt, but ultimately you're going to make more money if you're a winning team. So
hmm and that's an example what the Padres are doing right now. They had a huge offseason with getting Blake Snell, Drew Darvish, and several other players, and now they focus on winning, and that's a great way to make even more money now.
yeah, I don't really want to talk about the Darvish trade as a Cubs
Yeah.
fan, but no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's. I mean, again, it's that weird. Let's offload some money, but then decide to spend money in other
Mm.
places, and yeah, that was weird for me. The whole like we're gonna let Schwarber go, and then we're gonna pick up Jock Peterson, and it's
Yeah, I
like,
don't know what kind of offseason the Cubs had, but it's definitely not the top. It's not really a good offseason. They traded you Darvish as a salary dump. That's how I see it.
right.
Um, Kyle Schwarber, they just let him walk, right? Then
Yeah, he
and then try
was
to replace him with Jock Peterson.
exactly. Yeah,
No,
Schwarber was estimated to go for 8 million in negotiations, and so they let him
yeah,
walk. He ended up getting 10, essentially good for him. But yeah, we basically replaced him with an almost identical bat, who is a little bit better in the outfield.
basically.
But as a left fielder, you're not really like super excited about that. You're like, oh cool, my left field defense got better. Um, I mean, unless you're running like Juan Soto out there, you don't really care, right?
I mean, yeah, if his bat was really good, then it wouldn't mind having
Yeah.
a lack of defense out there. But also been hearing Chris Bryant has also been on the block, right?
Yeah, it's gone back and forth a ton. They keep saying there have been mentions of like if they got a sweetheart deal, if they get like an amazing deal, they'll go for it. Otherwise, there's no way. And then like at the very beginning of the season, the narrative was every player is on the table. Like if we get a good offer, we'll trade anyone away. And then they quickly redacted that and went like, well, not Rizzo obviously, because he's the heart of the team right now, and probably not Contreras. And really for Brian, it would have to be something, So they kind of kept backpedaling, and that's seems to be the narrative from the Cubs front office now is if we get an amazing trade or a perfect trade for Bryant, then we'll go for it.
I mean, the problem with that is that isn't it Bryant last year too?
I think you're
Like
right.
you either trade him now and or lose value during the season, or just let him walk in the free agency. Because I honestly don't see the Cubs sending him back the way they're going.
Yeah, I have a couple of sims with the Cubs, and we can pull that up and check really quick.
Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, he's getting something. I don't know what.
18 million. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much what you expect from a former MVP. 18 million is pretty decent.
Yeah, for the stats he put up in 2020, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money
I,
for sure.
and you never know. He probably bounces back. I've seen him on his prime. He's a good player that could give good numbers.
Yeah, I was saying I was really excited about the getting the video back in the dugout because I feel like him and Javi Baez are two guys who really looked at a lot of video. So I think he's going to have a huge bounce back season because he not because he was sign stealing, but because he was like pouring over the video. You know, he's one of those guys who like constantly reevaluates his strike zone and
Mhm.
is really good about adjusting to the umpires. Like Chris Bryant's a really smart player in that way.
Yeah, I've heard that before. Of the cosplayers seeing a lot of videos and getting feedback that way. Because I don't know. I think I read an article a few weeks ago, like a month ago, about that,
Hmm. Yeah, so
and
it's a big
and
move.
and how it's actually it helped them a lot on the plate. And basically, that's it. And I think it was since David Ross took over manager that they've been actually doing that pretty often. And it was actually a big reason why they even made the playoffs last year.
Yeah, it was so. Um, I think the rule was made at the beginning of last season. I think it was. I don't think the rule was enforced in spring training, but I think after spring training,
Mm.
players had to stop looking at video. I think that's how it went,
Okay, okay,
or at least
yeah,
the first run of spring training. Like we had that initial spring training, then the pandemic shut everything down, and then baseball got pushed back. And I think in that time frame is when they decided to shut down all the video stuff in the dugouts because they were again the big scare about sign stealing happened and now they're saying okay you can have the video, we're just going to blur the catcher's signs so you can't steal them.
yeah. That's pretty fair. I don't know exactly how's that gonna work. Like blurring out the signs. Like it's a good idea, but it's like is it always gonna work?
I don't know. I mean, does that mean it's interesting to think like, will it be the entire broadcast has this that blurred then, so no one can even you can't go to MLB
Yes,
TV and pick out your phone and then watch the game? Like, is that a thing? Maybe.
and it's something to be skeptical about. But let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think. Well, and it hurts the. It's fun from a commentator and a fan point of view because I don't know a ton about the game like day to day. I don't know how to play the game, but I know it's always fun for me when an announcer is like, "Oh, he's going inside with the fastball," and I'm like, "I don't know how you get that from the pinky," but that's what I
Yeah.
mean. Like the index finger is it tapped twice, so that's how you know it's this. I don't know which pitch is which, but it's
Yep.
I think it's fun from a fan perspective to hear the commentator tell us what that means. So we might lose that.
Yeah, we might actually do that. I mean, I don't know. I don't know exactly how I feel about that. It's just the backlash of the Astros. It's just still in my head.
Yeah, well, and again, more alleged scandals are coming out, and they're investigating more things, and we'll see how all of it lands.
Yeah. And also with the Cubs, former outfielder Abel Amora Jr. signed with the Mets as well.
That's he's a great player. We were talking about last week um, how like Bauer mentioned this actually how the incident where he had a foul ball hit a young fan in the stands, and how
I
that
remember that.
ever since that event he just hasn't quite been the same player offensively. He's been solid defensively. That's never been the
Also,
issue.
so you think it kind of affected him mentally, that scenario?
Maybe. I mean, it definitely affected him in the moment.
Hmm.
He mentioned in the press conference afterwards how it affected him, and then seemed to play, like seemed to kind of go on and do what he was supposed to do. But like pretty much since that time, he's been like a sub 250 hitter. He's just really struggled at the plate. He went from an everyday outfielder to a versus lefties outfielder to a bench player.
Yeah. I mean, ever since that happened, if I remember correctly, that was when they started to extend the foul line
Yeah,
netting.
the netting.
Yeah, so I think if that's the reason why, he could probably feel more comfortable knowing that the fans are even more protected now than they were before.
I hope so. He just, I don't know. It's hard to tell because obviously we don't know the players personally, but he always came off as a really genuine and good person. So I really hope he turns it around. I mean, it's one of those. It's like the DJ LeMahieu. It's just one of those players that like he seems great, seems like a workhorse. You hope he turns it
Hmm.
around, and obviously he did for the Yankees. So I wish him all the best with you guys, and that sometimes that changes scenery. Hopefully it is just something mental and he snaps out of it.
Yeah, hopefully, because the Mets could definitely just end up there. Because I believe he has pretty good defense, right?
Yeah, he's got solid
Yeah.
range. He's not. I wouldn't say he's a Gold Glover by any means, but he's a very serviceable outfielder, and he can play any of the three positions quite
Yeah,
handily.
whereas it could be another Juan Lagares. So yeah.
Absolutely. All right.
Um,
So fun baseball stuff for sure. Let's jump into our crush fam, our Kingpins. Now this file is before today's sim. So coming
mhm.
into the sim today, we were ahead. After the sim today, it's now us three all tied in the wild card. So
I'm
it's
looking at the PBM, and that's right now. And
yeah.
yeah, Mounties, Mordellos, and Kingpins are tied in the wild card.
So if the season ended today, there would be some sort of a
A
three-way
three-way tie. Yeah.
playoff thing to determine which two teams make it, which is a good spot to be in. I mean, there's so three sims left. So there's supposed to be 108 games on the season. Let's see. Let me do some quick mental math. So it's 88 games. So there's 20 games left. Is that right?
Around the it says here like the collection number will be 21. So yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, in order to clinch the playoff spot will be 21 games.
Yeah. A combination of 21 wins or losses by any of
Eh,
the teams.
Yeah, but I see that as the wild card. We have a pretty solid chance of catching up to the Dynamos. We're only 3 games behind them as of now, and their magic number is 18. So still some games to be played.
Yeah. And I honestly thought coming into this week we had a really good chance to not only get to the playoffs but to win the division. I think it's definitely up for grabs at this point.
Yeah, of course. The division is pretty close. Even the Mounties are in there because obviously they're tied with us in the wild card, but the East division is pretty wide open still,
Yeah,
unlike the West,
and then
where
looking at
it's
the expected win rate, ours has gone way down. We were up to at one point we were like 3 or 4 games over 500, so now we're back to even money. We're at 44 and 44 on the expected. But yeah, if you look here, so if the expected win rate was 41 and 40, a sim before that is when it was huge. So we had that
I
positive
see.
run differential coming in, and I want to say with this sim we lost that.
Um, I mean, I cannot see. Oh yeah, so 44, 44. So yeah, it did kind of was, but still, that's 500. 500 could still make us lead to the playoff, and all we need is a playoff spot, a wildcard spot, and be right in it.
Oh yeah, 500 is almost guaranteed a
Yeah,
playoff spot, like historically speaking throughout the history of the minors. So it's a fine spot to be in. There's nothing wrong with that.
yeah. I'm wondering how much is that going to change next season when the two expansion teams they come in.
Yeah, the question becomes, do they? Well, I'm really hoping that um, the new Brewers, the Milwaukee
The Brew
Bears,
Crew,
yeah,
I think it was
uh,
a Brew Bears. I
yeah,
forgot
Brew
the name.
Bears. There you go, the Milwaukee Brew Bears or Brew. Yeah, that sounds right. We'll go with that. We're not going to fact check it. We're just going to go with it. I really hope they end up in the East because of that classic, Cubs Brewers
Hmm.
rivalry. So
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
love to see the Chicago Milwaukee, reignite. And then I think Louisville, as a local might say it, and Kansas City maybe a little bit of a rivalry there, maybe a little bit.
yeah. That's all.
Kind of that the heartland. You talk about the Midwest is a really amorphous region of the United States that doesn't make any sense, and like people would consider Kansas City and Chicago to both be in the Midwest. It doesn't make any
Yeah,
sense. So like to me, the Midwest is like again, I consider the heartland the Midwest. So you talk about those large states with a few people in it. So I would
or
say the
or possibly the
Kings,
other expansion team I'm looking right now is the Louisville Lemurs.
the Lemurs. Yeah, that's I'm thinking the
Yeah,
Lemurs go to the West and the
the
Brew
Blue
Bears
Bears
come to the East. I
on the
believe
East.
that's
Okay,
the that's. I mean, we don't know. We don't know for certain. That's
but
my
it's gonna be
thought.
interesting for sure. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, if it's either the Lemurs or the Bears, that's gonna be pretty significant this season.
Yeah, and I wonder if we keep the playoff structures the same, where it's still just two. So essentially, instead of a 50-50 shot of making the playoffs, and then you have a 40-60, essentially, coming into this. All things considered
Okay,
equal, of course.
I think it's probably gonna stay the same. Top top team in each division gets to advance, and then the wild card spot.
Yeah, I mean, there's 14 teams in the majors in the PBE, so it would make sense because they have an additional round, right?
Yeah.
So they have, look at the wild card. Yeah, so essentially it's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, 8 spots. So basically it's just worse than 50%, and I think that's kind of the sweet spot. That's fun for everyone. Like
Hmm.
if almost 50% of the teams can make it, that's nice, but not 50% of the teams. So like I think the minors technically right now, if half the teams make it to the playoffs, it's not as exciting. But if less than
Yeah.
half make it, that expansion is going to make things a little bit more exciting, right?
I mean, but it's fun like that. If you do make the playoff, that's more like a privilege to actually make the playoff. It feels more like you earned it, like you got there. You know.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you look at the team history. We know that the Kingpins have never taken making the playoffs for granted. I mean, that's we were looking at this last week, but again the expected record never an expected winning record. At best, it's been 50-50
Hmm.
since the team was created.
And none of those without being a 500 season.
Yeah, this would be if this got even close to 500. 469 is still off the pace. I think we're 470 something, right? Let me double check. Yeah, 477 right now. So we're this would be like our third worst performance technically. No, our second.
Uh,
Yeah, our second worst because pretty much 480, 480, 490, 490, 490.
yeah.
And then don't count. I mean, again, when an
So
expansion team lands, you can't really look at their first
yeah,
season because
they're
they're going to
not
be
they're not gonna do
garbage. Yeah,
great the first season.
it's a little easier
They
in the minors, but still, yeah, you
yeah,
have you have a bunch of either fresh players or inactive players or a combination of those, and that's it.
yeah. That's how it is.
And that's what I'm told. That's typically how they do expansions. Is that the expansion teams get to pick. Essentially, they'll get to pick inactive players from other teams. Is how they've done it in the past.
Really, inactive
So
players or like that's why I asked before.
inactive only.
I was
So it's
wondering.
it's inactive, and then obviously they get like top picks in the draft. So they get first dibs on newer players, and then they get to try to supplement their ranks with essentially what other teams have been doing. Like our pitching staff, for example. Our pitching staff outside of Tony and Michael and Kaladin and Hunter is all inactives or bots.
Okay, so yeah, that's why I was wondering. Like, I like asked a question later on, like before on the locker room, asking if there's gonna be like a draft, like they do in major league. But I guess it's not only like six. There's only a few teams in the minors. I guess they don't have to do expansion draft. Just waivers and the draft. It should be enough to build their own players.
Yeah,
to build a team.
they'll get top picks. They'll get the top picks in
Yeah,
the
they get the
normal
top two
draft,
picks.
and so that'll supplement it. And then again, like we'll lose. I think we naturally lose Gambini, yeah, because this is his fifth season.
Hmm.
So he's not even eligible to be poached. Um, I think Luciano is a bot. I can't keep it
Yeah, I think
straight.
so.
I know Kingpin for sure is a bot, and the
Yeah, it's probably
bots.
going to be better right now.
Yeah, you can tell the bots
Isn't
because their potential is usually like significantly lower than 100 TPE would be.
isn't in Squishy Dart about
Scoochie's inactive, I think,
who he is?
but again, this is his. So I think the rule. I thought the rule was 5 seasons is the most you can play in the minors. It could be.
Mm,
I couldn't find this in the rule book. I looked at this today, and I couldn't find that specifically in the rule book. I might have just missed it. So maybe it's just a certain number of inactive seasons. Like it's your third inactive season is your final season, or maybe it's your second. I can double check that too, but so something to that effect. It's either 5 seasons in the minors is your max, or um, your third inactive season is your max. Either way, a lot of
I
these
think it's third
players
because
are going
we
away.
have had we have had peaks for that. This is the second season. I think Keith Lee been around for about 3 seasons, and Keith Lee, even though he's not in the main roster, he's still like on the inactive roster, but he's still on the team.
Yeah, he's technically an active player because they keep getting him to update.
Hmm.
But again, he's on his fifth season in the minors, so he's gone after this season no matter what.
Yeah,
It's going to be interesting. I think there's a lot of players. Like obviously we don't know your future. I think your manager has said at one point that she's going to pull you up, and then at one point that she's not. So I don't know.
I
She
mean, yeah,
might
it's
still
kind
be
of interesting,
deciding
but
that.
I don't think that she's gonna put me up yet. I think we might wait like another season because we still have Bobby McDonald at the shortstop position, and if they call me up now, it's not gonna be. I mean, pretty much I'm not gonna do anything in the majors yet.
Right on. Yeah, I mean it's. I think at least 3 seasons in the minors is fun, and I'm always willing to go more. Like if
Yeah, I
Person
wish
Man,
I wish I could stay more.
yeah, if Person Man was like you're gonna stay down for the full 5 seasons, I'd be like that's great. I'm 100% on board. Give me more chances.
Even though the majors, like being called up to the majors, is all fun and stuff, but like you getting called up and not performing at your level that you want it because that we know that we're not there yet.
Yeah.
It probably won't be fun at the beginning.
Yeah, I think obviously the younger teams they have to call people up. You don't have much of a choice over that, right? Like you've got to supplement the roster and get people playing. Um,
Hmm.
but like Kashima, I think has the best example with Benito Alomar
Yeah.
because she's a catcher who just she played 2 full seasons in the minors and then got called up and obviously like not even close to the TPE of other catchers. I mean this is like a great player in the minors, obviously, because this is what, like 600 TP at most. There's not a lot there. Great catcher, great for your pitchers, so you get excited
Yeah,
about it,
great catching ability.
but you're not
It's
going to
not.
get any hits with this in the
Yeah, the
majors, really.
offense is not there though. Yeah.
And that's not their fault. That's not to be clear. This isn't their fault, but because the team had a need, they kind of had to call him up
Hmm.
fast.
Yeah, that's pretty fair.
Like DVS got Elliot Alderson and called him up in his fourth year. This is so he has an additional year over Benito Alomar, and is still not a great offensive player, right? Like
Hmm.
similar,
Yeah, it's
also
not
a
that.
catcher, great catcher ability, good arm, a better hitter, significantly better
Yeah,
hitter,
it's not
but
that bad actually. That
not going to
the hitting's.
perform amazingly. Again, that's why it's only a 79 OPS plus.
Yeah,
So I think the
pretty
sweet
much
spot.
for a catcher, like that catcher ability could really help. Um, the fielding of the team and the pitcher, but then the hitting is that's where it comes.
Yeah, there actually have been some recent media posts about catcher ability, and there's been a lot of off-season research about it. A lot of people will tell you that going from like 50 catcher ability to like 80 catcher ability ish is a huge difference in ERA. It might cut a full point off of
Hmm.
your ERA depending on how great your defense is. It makes a huge difference. And then when you get above 80, it's a little bit more questionable. The difference between like 80 and 90, for example, for the TP you spend may or may not be worth it. We can actually compare those two since they're both in the majors right now and see defensively. So you can see defensively. Oh, excuse me. I thought. Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, Benito's got the way higher, 10 points higher catcher ability. I
Yeah,
think
that
I'll have
seems
to
to
go to
be
the
pretty much his
individuals.
focus. Since he's getting called up in the majors, which is defense.
Yeah, I'll have to go to their individual pages to see their catcher ERA. But yeah, so fielding stats, Elliot Alderson, and the other part of catcher ERA too is obviously the Death Valley pitching staff is a very tenured staff versus the Kashima staff is not. So this isn't a direct comparison either by any means. But a 3.6 for Elliot Alderson, and a 505. Again, that might be more of a reflection on the pitching staff than their actual catching. But again, the point is that there have been a lot of studies and research into catcher ability, and the jump between like 60-ish to like 80-ish or 50-ish to 80-ish is huge, and then 80
Mhm.
plus. It isn't a one-to-one correlation like everything gets better. It might get better. It might just stay the same. So I think that's
Yeah.
important to note. But yeah, so it's for me the sweet spot is 4 seasons. If you can spend at least 4 seasons in the minors, you're probably when you're hitting that fifth season, you're coming in with like 700 plus TPE.
Hmm. So yeah, like once you get to like user CP, because I know in the minors the cap is 350, but once like all the CP in the bank, you could pretty much just bank it in, and you'll be a completely different player than you were before.
Yeah, I was
Like in this.
playing. I was playing with the stats last night. I was just looking at okay, because essentially what I want to be able to do when I get promoted is go from like 60 to 80 range, and then ideally I'd get my avoid Ks on both sides maxed out to 60 as well. Get my BABIP to 65. Right now it's at 60 on both sides, and then go from there. And essentially doing that, just doing those moves, not bumping power at all, would get me. It means I would need to leave the minors with like roughly 800 TPE.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, that
I
would
mean,
that would be pretty significant in getting up your boy case and your BABIP, especially since your power is already pretty high actually. And once you get your BABIP and your boy case pretty high, that's like that'd be a pretty good major league player already.
yeah, it's something like this.
Mhm.
No, it only did versus right. Oh, that's big chunks. That's why. Would help if I selected the right player. Yeah, yeah. So something like, and again, this is kind of looking similar to like Elliot Alderson looks, right? How like yeah, the hitting seems okay, but it's not gonna produce like amazing numbers at the PBE level.
Yeah,
So
like it's
that's
okay,
that would
but
be
it's
four
not.
seasons essentially. So if you spend a fifth season in the minors, then that's another like roughly 200 TP, like give or take 200 TP every off season. So if you spend four
That's pretty
seasons in
much
the
it.
minors, that's 800 TP ish, right? Plus or minus a little bit. If you're a max earner, if you spend 5 seasons at the 1,000 TP ish, plus or minus. So then I
Yeah,
could do
about
something like power, right? I could do what I want.
like that's the goal, right? So that's where you want to get.
Sometimes if I'm too fast or click the wrong things, it doesn't change it. Yeah, see, I broke something. That's fine. He's great against lefties. Yeah, I don't know what I did, but anyway,
Yeah,
the
anyways,
point
I
the
have to
point being, yeah.
go.
Oh yeah, yeah. You do what you got to do.
So it's already 9:07. Yeah, I should have been headed home already. But
No, I appreciate that.
yeah, it
Go.
was.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for being a part of it, and we'll get you in again. So
Yep,
we'll
we
talk some
will.
more. Thanks again for making it so I didn't have to talk to myself for 30 minutes here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Of course, it was. I'm always glad to join anytime. So anytime. So see you next time. Okay.
Yeah, safe travels.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So Chris Jimenez, Chris Brick Square is out. He's left the building, but you still got me, folks. It's okay. But anyway, the point being, again, plan for the future. That's what I like to do. Is I like to look at my player and think about next steps. I always think about next steps. So yeah, dream like you get to do exactly what you want because it's a game and it's fun. I don't know. That's my whole philosophy on PBE and out of the park in general. Even it's remembering it's a game, and if it's not fun, you need to change something. And if you can't find something to make it fun, then maybe you shouldn't be playing it. That's kind of that's your option at that point. But hopefully you find it fun. That's because we need players. Please come. Please play the game. Please keep playing. So yeah, hopefully the team stays relatively strong into this postseason run. Again, a 4-3 day is great. If we have 3 more sims like that, we're almost playing 500 ball, and that probably means we just made the playoffs. So yeah, we would end up. Let's see. So 54 wins. Oh, that would be even money. That would be 500 ball. So there you go. Oh, I'm sorry. There's only 20 games left, so not quite. So we can't have 3, 4, and 3 sims because there aren't that many games left. But if we can grab, let's say 11 of those, so the team would be 53 and 54. Is that right? Yeah, because we have 88 games have been played, 108 games remain. That's a difference of 20. If we win 11 games, that takes our record from 42 to 53. If we lose 9 games, it takes our record from 46 to 50. Oh, 55, excuse me. That's the difference. So 53 and 55 would be our final record. That's probably a playoff team. Looking at again the history of the league, the history of the Kingpins, the history of Chris Crust Jacob is always fantastic. Yeah, so looking at the history again, our playoff seasons came when we were like a 480 record, 490 record. So that roughly 2 games under 500 seems to be a pretty good success rate for getting in. But we'll see, right? All right. So one thing I did want to do was go through some general simulation fun. So if you're interested in helping your team out in your war room or just getting to know the game a little bit better, there's some relatively basic stuff you can do to help your team out, to help test things, and to generally get a little bit more back-end knowledge on how the game runs. So the basic functionality we're using is the simulation module. So under the play menu, we're using the simulation module. And obviously we're selecting the Kingpins, and since they're the division contenders, let's go up against the Dynamos. You can select any number of games. I usually sim 5,000, but for these purposes, let's just do 1,000. Just because it's a little bit quicker. Game importance versus normal versus playoffs versus elimination. I'm sure it makes a difference of some sort. I would assume that the big thing is substitutions, which aren't a factor for the Kingpins. Might be a factor for other teams like the Dynamos since they have a bigger bench. But for what I'm trying to do, I'm not really concerned about it. Essentially, what I'm trying to do is turn this team or this matchup into a winning matchup for the Kingpins. That's the goal. We'll do the automatic ballpark, and because of the nature of these games, because they're all 3-game sets, ideally there would be off days after 3 games, but essentially the equivalent is going to be 2 games. So imagine it's like a playoff series where you play 2 games, you have a day off, you play 2 games, you have a day off. So essentially a 4-man rotation works fine because pitchers only have to pitch once every 7 days. So after 2 games works just fine for that purpose. We don't want to save any of this stuff. I'm not really concerned about the box score or the game logs. And ballpark, for now we're going to do automatic. There's also some testing that you can do to help your team in the off season, maybe tweak their settings. So we'll explore that in a future podcast. But in this instance, let me just go ahead and simulate this. And yeah, right now, 2 pretty even teams. As the simulation ran and decided that we would get a lot more home runs than our opponent. I don't know how we get a stolen base because our stealing is turned pretty much all the way down, but we did. That's impressive. Pretty good ERA. So you can see our run differential, it's a minus 73. So we scored 73 less runs than our opponent over that 1,000 game set, it's a really tight contest. That's not bad at all. You can see our defense was a little bit better. We just didn't strike out as many. So our Ks per 9 and our Ks per walks were both down. And we walked a few more batters. So the runs scored a little bit worse. The runs allowed a little bit worse in both cases. So the first thing I like to look at is OPS. I always start on the hitting side with OPS. Typically, and again, I know it's not 1-to-1, but it is a roughly 90% accurate comparison to say, okay, this is basically your best hitter. This is basically your second best hitter. And then from here, you can kind of hem and haw about it. You can look at, okay, well, this OPS is technically higher, but look at their average is technically higher. So, I mean, OPS is a little tricky in where you have a bunch of players that are really close to each other. So there's kind of debate for all of this. But essentially the mindset of our lineup is we have a 340 on-base hitter, roughly, in Vinny Picone, or Picone, or Pick One. I think it's Picone. I've always said Picone. Hopefully someday Vinny can be on the Crush Fan podcast and correct us. So that's our leadoff man. And then we have our best hitters in our 2 and 3 spots. When I run simulations, I typically put the best hitter in the 2 spot and the second best hitter in the 3 spot. But that obviously isn't a requirement. And because I did it over a smaller period, typically I don't see OPS results for my player this high. So I'll show you guys a 5,000 simulation. So it'll take a little bit longer to run, but it's the bigger the sample size, the less variance there will be. So there still will be variance, right? Randomness will still happen. There will still be players playing above and below their actual skill, but the more things you simulate, the less random it becomes. Oh wow, and you can see actually in this 5,000 game set, the Kingpins actually score more runs than the Dynamos. So the run differential becomes positive, roughly positive 450. Not quite, but very close. And again, you can see Chris Jacob really likes playing against the Dynamos. Apparently, he has no problems. So that's. Oh, you know what? You know what, guys? You know what I did? This is my edited player. I'm like, there's no way. I've never run a simulation where he's the best home run hitter because this is the edited version. So what we're going to do is fix that. Yeah, see, he would be the greatest minor league hitter of all time because he's got blown up stats. So we'll bring him back down to earth here. I think we have it back now. Yeah, see, his versus lefties is still crazy for some reason. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close OOTP and we're going to reopen it. Don't worry, we're coming back. Let's just make sure. Yep, there we go. Chris Jacob is back to human. Alright, so now let's try that 5,000 games again. And that's one thing you'll notice. So there's a couple ways to do it. If you accidentally, like if you edit players and you see weirdness in OOTP, I just did a quick Alt-Control-Delete and ended the task, and that way it doesn't overwrite my save file. The problem is if I went back to the start screen, it would automatically save every time I quit. So the only way to avoid that easily is to either back up the game by saving another copy to your desktop or another folder somewhere, or just crash the game and then reopen it. And it's usually just, for me, it's faster to just crash it and reopen it instead of trying to move files to folders. All right, one more simulation. Here we go. Well, not one more, but one more time we're going to do this simulation. And again, those off days after 2 games roughly gets us to the same. Again, it's not quite the same, but it's pretty close. And now we should see Chris Jacob be still a good hitter, but the second best home run hitter on the team. Okay, so that's a negative run differential. That is a minus 351, which is not bad at all. That's a very close margin. I would say that's still roughly within the general variance. But yeah, so you can see, again, Chris Jacob, considered the best OPS hitter. Krobertheek's right behind him. Really low on the power numbers, surprisingly. Did not hit a lot of home runs. And then Chungus and Picone bringing up number 3 and number 4. So these are generally your top 4 every time I've run a simulation, generally speaking. And I like Vinny in the leadoff spot because he has a really good on base, but doesn't slug as much, generally. In this one he did. That's fine. So maybe, yeah, it might be one of those where actually Big Chungus is better off in the leadoff spot. But yeah, usually Chungus has better slugging both in home runs and in doubles and triples, not just doubles and triples as he did here. So look at this. We say, okay, it's pretty close. The team scored 25,046 runs. So that's the number we're trying to change. So if I go to the lineup, I'm gonna make a very simple change here. I'm just gonna put Chris Jacob in the number 2 spot instead of the number 3 spot. That's all we're gonna change. And I think that's the key to a lot of running these sims, is make very small marked changes and judge progress that way. And typically you're going to want to run multiple simulations on one mode and then switch things and run multiple simulations on that other one. So now we're going to run that same 5,000 game set and see what happens now. All we did was change Chris Jacob and Krobertheek. So we're trying to get above essentially 25,000 runs scored. So it was like 80 more runs. So because we were at about 25,024, I believe. Scored about 85 more runs this way. But you can see the run differential It's one run. It's so close. It's just one run. So the run differential got a lot better. Again, we didn't change anything about the runs allowed, uh, aside from the potential, like when the Kingpins win more games, if they win them as the home team, they won't get to bat in the ninth inning. That's really where you might lose runs. But otherwise, yeah, the goal is just to increase this number. So you can see the hitting from your top performers didn't change much. You can see Chris Jimenez actually stepped in. He's stealing bases. Why is he stealing bases? This is interesting. So I was not aware that Chris Jimenez was stealing bases. We're going to look at his stats real quick and try to figure out why that is. Yeah, you can see our team strategy is we never steal bases. Now looking at the player strategy, oh, and I'll also change this. I have a favorite setup that has speed in it, which I like. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not sure. I don't know why he stole bases because he's set to team strategy settings. So I guess it's even with that slider all the way down, your team will occasionally steal a couple bases. All the way down. You can't click it any further. That's funny. All right, we're gonna run it one more time. I'm just curious to see if that one run difference will just go away if we just run another sim. And yeah, keep in mind that I'm just running against the Dynamo specifically, so doing it this way is probably more effective in the playoffs themselves. If you're trying to get true season variance, you're better off running simulations until the end of season and then following that method I described before of just crashing the game and reopening the save file or just having a backup copy of the save file. So again, remember variance, right? Even if you plan everything correctly, plus or minus 5% on whatever that median is going to be. So that 25,000 runs may be the high end, even though we've seen it twice now. Maybe that 25-ish thousand is actually the high end of the variance, and the variance is closer to like 24,500. So I could run 10 of these simulations, and I might get some that say like 24.2, 24.6, and 25. I might get that 24.6 might be the sweet spot. But you can see the first time I ran it, they were one run apart. This time, it's miles apart. It's 900 runs apart. So, but yeah, you can see the top players still did top player things. And trying to steal 21 bases over 5,000 games is not a ton. But it does explain why we've seen Chris Jimenez get picked off in a couple games recently, and that's interesting. I think part of it is, I think his speed is the highest on the team, his speed and base running, as is his stealing. Yeah, so you can see he's the highest. Pork chop sandwiches, pork chop sandwiches is the second highest. And then we've got a bunch of freak builds that just have the default, or they put a little bit in speed. So I put 10 in speed since I had 10 left over, and I could have either put my avoid K's each up by 1 and then put 1 in speed, or just put 5 in speed. And I just put 5 in speed. But yeah, you can see in those simulations, I'm not trying to steal any bags. I think Pork Chop tries to steal 1 bag, and then Jimenez tried to steal like 12 bags. And that's another fun thing about Out of the Park. So playing perfect team mode, you learn that if your player has better speed than stealing ability, he'll take a lot of bad jumps. He'll try to steal bases that he can't actually steal because he'll get a really bad jump on it, and even though he's super quick, he just don't know what he's doing. It's bad. So if you have a player like this, you don't want to turn even if it's like 60 and 50, you don't want to turn their stealing all the way up because they're going to try to steal bags and get caught a lot more. So, Yeah, that experiment didn't really do much for us, right? So if I if we just put it right back to where it was, switch the 2 and the 3, and again, it's a pretty minor change. We're not doing a lot to the lineup. We'll see if we can get back to that 25 or if it sticks around that 24. I'm thinking the 24-6-ish might actually be that average runs for us. Okay, so it goes back up a little bit, so 24-9. And again, just remember that runs allowed is not what we were trying to affect. So if I'm trying to affect runs allowed, now I'm looking at defensive alignments, and I'm also looking at pitching. Now, one fun thing that I only recently learned is that so I'm familiar with Perfect Team. In Perfect Team, you can train up any player at any position that they have at least some base stats in. They'll train up to something. And in Out of the Park, in PBE, players have a default position that they're really good at, and then 2 other positions where they get 150 out of 200 experience and 100 out of 200 experience. So I have these base stats. I've never played right field, never played left field, but I have some base stats because I chose them as my secondary and tertiary positions. So I was under the impression coming in that you can't actually improve anywhere. That if you've run in one position, whatever you selected as your backup and your tertiary, these will never improve. I recently learned that is not the case. So one fun thing, if I were to simulate multiple seasons, for example, I could put my player at, say, third base, and these stats would translate. He would have a terrible turn double plays, 26 base turn double plays, so that's why third base would probably be, he wouldn't be a middle infielder, but you could chuck him at third base and he'd be okay. He would train up. He would get some stats at third base. So I have a little handy dandy positional ratings calculator that I can get some base numbers off of. It's not 100% reliable at the lowest defensive ratings, but let's put in, so his infield range is 61. His arm is 41. His turn double plays is 26. And his error is 31. So he would be train up to roughly a 27 rating at third base. Roughly 27. He would actually train up to a 38 at second because he has such high range. So he actually wouldn't be bad at second base. But yeah, so if our team, for example, we have an inactive center fielder and we didn't lose the center fielder for whatever reason, he's actually not super well rated in center field. We probably wouldn't want him playing center field necessarily. But say we had no players that could play third base, and then looking at his stats, so I'll put those same stats in here. So my player would be a roughly 27 at third base. So I'm putting in all of the numbers I see here, the 51, 51, 51, 41 essentially. And you can see, so he would actually train up to 35 at third base. So he'd actually be an okay infielder. And you can see our current infielder of Big Chungus is actually rated only a 23 at third base. He doesn't have great range, great error, or great arm. So this is a scenario where if Chungus is in his 4th season with the team, maybe he gets called up next season, or maybe we have him for one more season. But we might consider someone else at third base if we lose our amazing hitting Big Chungus. I mention him specifically. So coming into this sim, 13 errors. After today's sim, he's at 15 errors. And if we look at the stats for the league, that's pretty bad. It's not ideal. So we look at our fielders. We'll look at so we see total errors for all positions. coming into this sim, he led total errors in all positions. So I'm sure he's miles apart, unfortunately. Yeah, third base. Okay, so both him and Sam Andrews have played some third, or at least are rated at third. I'm not sure if he's actually played it or not. Oh, he has. Okay, so him and Sam Andrews both have had some rough fielding. And again, you can see his stats aren't terrible. He's rated a 28, which isn't the worst. But yeah, both of them have had troubles holding onto the ball. So yeah, that's the wrong stat to be winning in, unfortunately, is errors. All right, so we didn't really get any wins that way, and then you can do more radical things. So you can change up the roster, right? You can change the lineup all day. You can move these players around, move these positions around. So I also talked about Big Chungus being a similar player. He's going to hit for more. He's going to have a higher OPS because he's going to be more of a slugger. He's going to hit more doubles and triples. So let's just compare the two. Yeah, so you can see Chungus just has gap power, and Vinny does not. Vinny actually beats Chungus on contact and avoid Ks, as well as I. So he should be technically a little bit better for on base, and then a little bit worse on slugging. That's what the line should be. And you can see on our season so far, that hasn't been the case. Chungus has been great on base and slugging. Both of them are switch hitters. I think they both have the same batted ball profile. We'll double check that. So Vinny's a bit of a pull hitter. And Big Chungus. Oh, they're both pull hitters. Okay. So they're both switch hitting pull hitters, so they should have similar results on their hits, except again, Vinny should be slightly better on base. But just to confirm that theory, let's try changing them up. So we'll put Big Chungus in that leadoff spot, switch him with Vinny. And we'll do that against both sides since they're both pretty even against both sides. Actually, Chungus I think is better versus righties. Yeah, he's better versus righties, but still really good versus lefties. No slouch versus lefties. So we'll run that same simulation again, that 5,000 game set, and see if we get around that 25,000 mark. And remember, all we're trying to do is affect that one listing, the runs scored, and then kind of see the breakdown in the box scores in the player breakdown below, and see if we can get those numbers to improve as well. There is a mindset about like the back end of OOTP. If you put players in quote unquote protected positions, right? If you put them between really good players, how does that affect their performance? So you can see putting Big Chungus in the leadoff spot, his performance dips a little bit. His on base gets worse, his slugging gets worse, so he's just a worse hitter when he's trying to start games off. So that was a bad change, and we could see pretty immediate results. So that wasn't good. So we gonna change it back. And then we've got kind of the back end of the lineup. So the bottom of the order leans towards our two newest players, Pork Chop Sandwiches and Atlas Gray. And I usually start when I'm doing the rosters, so before I even run simulations, I tend to do rosters based on contact. So looking at the lineup versus right, I would tend to do kind of like a 1 through 9 this way, and then look at like, okay, I actually want my best contact hitter in the number 2 spot, I want my second best in the number 3 spot, and then I want someone who's got better eye. So like Scary Terry, if he wasn't an extreme pull hitter, I would probably have him in the leadoff spot, because he's going to get on base a lot more than most players. But yeah, unfortunately, he's an extreme pull hitter, so he hits into the shift a lot and doesn't get a lot of success right now. We're going to hopefully get him to change that in the off season. But yeah. So looking at like the back end of the lineup. So let me run. Let's for example, let's just change like Scary Terry and Alex Frank, because right now I have Scary Terry ahead of Alex Frank versus lefties, not righties. Let's do versus both and see what happens. And ideally, what you do is every time you run one of these sims, you can save it somewhere else. You can open the sim in a like an Internet Explorer, or Microsoft Edge, or Chrome, or Firefox, whatever you use. You can open it in a browser window, so it makes it really easy to save. I'll show you that too. So yeah, it's just this button right here is open in browser, and then whatever your default browser is will open it up. If you get that ActiveX warning, just allow it, and it'll save it into a tab, and then that way every time you run one of these, you can open it in a new tab and just kind of catalog your changes and say, okay, I did this time, it was worse, it was better. But yeah, you can see we put Scary Terry higher up, and you did a little bit worse. You did a little bit worse higher up. So it's possible moving him down on both sides is actually the right move. So we'll try that. And you can see Terry is actually a little bit better versus righties than lefties, but he has balanced out a lot. So he's actually got a little bit higher, or excuse me, he was better versus lefties. Now he is almost balanced between lefties and righties. And yeah, you can see Alex Frank, just a really good on base hitter, right? He's got great eye, great avoid Ks, some decent contact. So he's going to get on base a lot. And he is a normal hitter versus the extreme pull of Scary Terry. So yeah, all I'm doing is changing the 6 and 7 spots here. We gonna run that sim. So to recap, Alex Frank had a 693 OPS. Scary Terry had a 690 OPS. Alex Frank gets a little bit worse. Terry gets a little bit better. So not much change between those two. They stayed pretty much the same. The runs scored actually went down slightly, so we'll just put it back the way it was. And yeah, you can experiment. I mean, you can try, putting Scary Terry down to number 9 spot, because maybe like get these guys on base and then get someone to hit him home before the leadoff. Let's try that. That sounds fun. Not that Scary Terry's our worst hitter, but that he might actually knock in some runs that others wouldn't. Yes, waiting is the hardest part. All right, again, you can see that he got worse. The further down we put him, the worse he got hitting. Um, Pork chop sandwiches was hitting a 708 OPS. Now he's at a 702. Alice Gray was a 696 OPS. Now he's a 680. So everyone got a little bit worse. A little bit worse. And again, part of that sim variance. So part of that is, okay, it's just going to happen. And part of that is, oh, maybe we made a bad change. So you have to run a lot of sims to get that variance kind of under control. If you want to get into like the super nerdy statistician portion of it, you would essentially run a bunch of sims and then figure out what the standard deviation was. So figure out what all of this, run like 20 sims at least, and see what all of the runs scored come out as, and then figure out, okay, what's the furthest away, and then what's within like a roughly 30% margin. What happens most commonly? What's your 60% on either side, either worse or better than your average run scored? Throw out everything else and then kind of go from there. So that is the basics of Sims. I think we'll do more, like I said, with the pitching side of it. Try to pull down those runs allowed, as well as making some roster tweaks from a fielding standpoint. We weren't able to get improvements based on lineup changes. Our lineup is pretty optimized. I just wanted to show you guys the process. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. I hope you guys learned something that maybe you didn't know or maybe you weren't trying to do before. And maybe it's, reinvigorated or got you reinterested in PBE. Maybe you want to reach out to your GMs and say, hey, I can help out in the war room, or I can run some sims for you. Just let me know what you want me to test. But either way, thanks for listening. I appreciate your time. Shout out again to Chris Brick Squared, aka Chris Crush Jimenez, for backing me up for the first half. And yeah, it was great. A lot of fun. I'm still loving the game. I hope you guys are enjoying PBE as much as I am. And I'll see you on the field. Take care.